Hello and welcome to the Horticulturalists. I'm Stephen Ryan.
And I'm Matthew Lucas.
And we post a video every Friday, so why not press subscribe and the alert button to keep up to date with our adventures.
Indeed. And if you have a burning horticultural question for Mr. Stephen Ryan, do put it in the comments below and say where you're from, and he will answer it every Monday in 60 seconds. I'll just read it out.
Yeah, we hope.
No, it will happen.
Yes.
But now, Stephen, we're in a very bucolic situation.
We certainly are. We're at our friend Ben Brooker's garden, which we've been in before,
Yes.
At Treasured Perennials in Bruin. And we're going to talk to Ben. In fact, we're going to get down and dirty with Ben.
We're even going to get into the garden kitchen.
Yeah, so we're going to look at soil health and Ben's attitude to it and the things he does to improve the soil health and also to deal with things like hydrophobic soils and other sundry things. So I think this will be a really interesting down-to-earth session, actually.
It's fascinating because I mean, more and more people understand that soil health is key, that when you're beginning a garden, the soil preparation is vital. And we made a film about your journey preparing your soil because yours was a burnt out house site, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I would say that my soil
wasn't soil.
yeah, it was non-existent. So I had to start from a very low base.
Yeah.
Ben at least has got depth of soil, but he's had all sorts of issues with his soil, and he'll go in and tell us about that and why and how he's learnt to ameliorate it.
Yeah, well, before we go and meet Ben, firstly, Treasured Perennials is a specialist seller of the rare and the unusual, bulbs, but mainly perennials.
Yep.
They don't sell online, they don't do e-com, unfortunately, but they do go to all of the rare plant fairs in and around Victoria, and I think sometimes in New South Wales.
Yep.
So I'll put the link to their Instagram account below. So if you're interested and you're in this area, do follow them. Obviously, if you're international, unfortunately, they can't ship internationally. But this video will be full of interesting things about soil health that anyone can do. And that is the most exciting thing.
Of course it is.
You don't need a lot of equipment, a lot of money, or vast acreage to do what Ben's been doing.
Yes, exactly. So it's very down to earth, easy to follow instructions on how to create and improve your soil.
Let's go.
All right, everybody, I'd like to introduce Ben Brooker, who is the co-owner of this amazing property and garden. And we're going to ask Ben a few questions about things.
I'm very excited because Ben and I have prior, because Ben is always at the most interesting rare plant fairs and his stand is always the most magnetic.
Yeah.
I've
seen you walk across a whole car park virtually.
Pushing people.
Yeah, that's right, to get there.
You have things that no one else has. So I guess actually that's my first question then. So how did that begin for you, that interest in the rare and the unusual?
I think it was more about, just trying to set myself apart, in the industry. I think the industry was more about, a lot of general lines. So I think to set myself apart, I think I had to look at and source things from overseas, from around the world. And then I think my passion of rare and unusual, that's where it sort of started. And I think once I started it, I didn't stop. I didn't stop.
You can't get off
Is
that.
this sounding familiar?
Yeah, it does sound very familiar to me as well. I think we all go through that, don't we, Ben, where, you go out and see what's in the trade. All right, it's there. They're growing it by the hundreds of thousands. But it's that one plant you didn't know about that you want.
It is. And I think that's what really interests me. Because I think it's more, finding that different thing and then educating people about it was I think a very big passion of mine as well. So, and I think having that interest, now everyone else is sort of, following us because of what we actually are growing.
Great.
Yeah, so being boutique works.
It does.
It does.
One thing I'd like to know about the garden, you've been laying it out in a lovely way, but how much of the garden is dictated by what you want to do with regards to growing plants for sale?
Well, generally, we started, we wanted to colour coordinate our garden and sort of have complementary sort of colours, together. But everything what's in the garden is what is going to be what our stock plants is. So we wanted to trial these plants before we actually decided to release this to the public.
Just an interjection. So was the colour coordinating Kerry's vision, yours, a combination?
I think a combination. Kerry's her background is art, so she's very very disciplined in the sense of using colours sort of correctly. We started off in the garden, which we're still standing in now, which is pretty well the colours of the rainbow.
Yeah.
Sort of done a transition between yellow to oranges to reds, then into like your purples and then the pinks. So you it's that transition of colours sort of moving into each other.
Yep.
And that sort of started our basic pretty well the rest of our garden and for future gardens as well. So
Now, having looked around the garden, as we've done this morning, you started off with nothing at ground level basically, but you have inherited quite a lot of large trees and things to garden amongst.
So yeah, very, very difficult, I think, because of trying to sort of revolve around what's already here. We didn't have many we didn't actually have any sort of garden beds sort of laid out at all. It was just all basically pretty all just trees everywhere, which we've had to move a couple and then try and work around.
Including Exhibit A behind us.
Yes,
Yeah,
this
the
purple gladicia.
Yeah, that was one of the first things where we're standing now. Was one of the first things we actually did was move the tree. We knew we had to have a central point, which is the October Glory maple. It's in the centre of our lawn area.
Yeah.
And then around that lawn area, we've got a pretty well, we've got the colours of the colour wheel around.
So Ben, how old is this garden? When did you sort of begin taming what I presume was fairly wild and unkept land?
So we purchased the property about 8 years ago, but we done a lot of renovations and all that to the house first, and then we started looking at the garden, realising that we've actually got a lot of blackberries and vinca, a lot of nasty sort of weeds that we had to sort of look after.
Introduced species.
Yes.
You introducer of species.
Yeah, but I don't know that Ben or I have imported any new blackberries or different varieties of vinca necessarily, but there you go.
Yeah, nothing of this is spreaded yet, so
Yeah,
which
yes.
is good.
Yeah, but this is what happens in horticulture. Sometimes you bring something in that actually likes it more than it should, but good garden plants don't necessarily take off.
So I think our garden has probably only been about 4 years.
Right, so
just
that's
slowly.
not long.
No, just slowly. But it's been the last 2 years where we've really sort of ramped up a few things where we started. Now we've got direction where we want to go with the garden.
Yeah.
It's really taking shape, and there's journeys and pathways it takes you around. There's a real narrative.
A circuit, in fact,
Ah.
which I love in a garden because if you sort of stand in a garden and you could go that way or somewhere else, but there's no obvious route that you can take through the garden, then you become discombobulated a bit. And I think a garden that has a journey that seems to be reasonably well laid out for you works extra well. I think it works.
Yours does. Yours has got very
It's got little sort of defined paths that take you on a bit of a journey, and certainly this garden does exactly the same thing, except for the scale of it, because you're working on a much larger scale than I do. About how big would you say the garden is, Ben?
At the moment, it's about an acre and a half.
Yeah.
So
But you've got more land than that, haven't you?
Yeah. So we're 6 acres, the property.
Yeah.
So,
It could get bigger yet.
it will get bigger. Yeah. So we've got plans for a bigger. Yeah.
And
bigger.
what hurdles did you have to overcome? Because I think a lot of people might be in your position, so taking on what was a wild and overgrown garden or starting from scratch. So there are, I guess, different hurdles you've got to deal with. So what were some of the problems that you had to deal with before you could kind of do the fun stuff?
Yeah, I think it was the trees and the layout of pretty well how we're going to lay the garden out, how we can connect, I think, pretty well each bed with each other. Because the idea is we want to make it so when people walk around that it flows through quite comfortably. You're not sort of having to look for paths or anything like that. We just want everything to sort of flow quite well. The other major factor is we had a lot of dead soils here as well, so we had to look at how can we improve our soils.
Last thing then, is there a particular group or a type of plant that you're really interested in? I mean, I know you've got quite a few sort of cordexy, pelargonium-y things, but anything else that really rings your bell at the moment?
Anything that's rare.
Oh, look, you just cut from the same cloth.
Yeah, well, I have to say, though, if Ben was going to be classified in any way, I guess most of the plant material you collect and grow tends to be perennials and bulbs, doesn't it? So that's where your main thrust is.
Right. Was your...
I tend to be a little bit more...
A generalist.
Yeah, well, in fact, I probably over the years have lent further and further towards the woody plants. Because I used to have a lot of bulbs, particularly, but now I'm sort of growing more woodland perennials and trees and shrubs. So I seem to have moved in that direction a bit. And I don't know that it was an intentional thing. It just sort of happened. But then there were people like Ben and other nurseries that started growing perennials to sell, because back in the 1940s and 50s, there was nobody growing perennials except for Dennis Norgate over in Blackwood, who was doing them from the 1940s. So I guess when I started out, there weren't that many perennials about. So it was nice to be able to offer them. But now Ben's doing a really good job, and there are others that are doing it as well. So I seem to have moved more to the woody plants.
Because I'm bringing a lot more different species in too. So I think overall we're about 3,000 species that we actually grow.
Wow.
And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get this all into our garden. So yeah, when we do decide to have an open garden, that we can show people how we can grow these things.
Yeah. And the Instagram account, which we'll link, will reveal if and whenever the garden is open to public, but also when Ben and Kerry are visiting any of the rare plant fairs. So you must mark it in your diary and come and say hello, because it's the only way in any time that you can see the amazing things that you've been growing.
So Ben, what on earth was here when you first arrived when it comes to your soil?
Look, we found a lot of our soils were very hydrophobic. There was actually no life in our soils, and whatever we planted just didn't survive. It just pretty well would last about a week, even though I'd water it, just wouldn't do what I actually wanted to do. So,
right.
So we have hydrophobic soils and allopathic soils.
What does that mean?
Allopathic meaning that the plant will actually, when it drops its foliage, it releases an enzyme into the soil, and it prevents some other plants from actually having any competition to that actual plant. So it actually sort of can pretty well nearly kill the soil.
Right, so, and that's the fault of your large trees and things, I guess?
It is, yeah.
So we're walking under, a row of old pines, which is very common to find on older Australian properties, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And these ones were probably one of the first ones I actually planted when the house was first built. We're probably looking at about 130-year-old. So they are pretty old pines here.
So this was kind of, I guess, the classic example of hydrophobia under here?
Yeah. So
hydrophobic.
hydrophobic, yeah.
It was frightened of water.
So basically, there's still a lot of groundwater, which is actually quite deep. So it's actually, but the hydrophobic, which is pretty well going to be more on your top soil. So it's actually stopping all your smaller roots from actually penetrating into the deeper.
And what causes that? Is that, so in my mind, so I'm the rank amateur amongst the three of us here. Is that, like particularly with pine needles, because the pine needles build up when they drop a layer that becomes almost impermeable, is that the cause of the hydrophobic nature of the soil?
It can be, yeah, because it can actually release an oil, so which can actually help the repellent of the moisture.
And of course, it doesn't help when the roots of your trees are close to the surface either, because they suck up almost anything that's there. Yeah. And once the soil becomes hydrophobic, to break that cycle can be quite difficult. So, because you've got roots going down, even if you can get water into the ground, the roots are going to keep sucking it up and taking it up the trees. So it can be quite difficult.
This is sounding insurmountable. We've got nowhere to go with this video.
No, in fact there is, and that's what Ben's going to show us, I think.
All right, well, let's go and learn more. So Ben, I want to say hydrophobia. Hydrophobic soils. So you were just pointing out, this is a good example.
Yeah, so we had 6 mil of rain yesterday.
Yeah.
Pretty well what you see is you only probably see around about nearly 5 mil on the top of the soil, which is actually wet.
Yeah.
And when you get down, that's it. That's just dry.
And it's bone dry.
Yeah, just very powdery.
So Stephen's point was it's really hard to change that sort of the nature of that soil once it's happened. So what have you done in this border to try and turn this situation around?
So we go in and do it's a slow stage. We put like a green manure down, and then a dry sort of brown manure. When I say brown manure, it's like I'm talking about leaves, sticks, even some different sized branches and all that as well. And then things like weeds to cut grass, we throw that on top, which is actually your nitrogen source.
So that's quite simple.
It is.
That's just basically layering sort of garden clippings and garden waste on the hydrophobic soil.
Yep. And then after a little while, then you add a mulch on top of that. And what that mulch does is it actually pretty well captures all that moisture,
Right.
and it stays cool and moist.
Right.
So eventually what happens is the hydrophobic will eventually become nice and moist.
Right. So how long has it taken you to turn this around?
Probably about 3 months.
Oh!
Yeah, so it
Wow.
doesn't take long at all. So 3 months worth of work, so it doesn't take much at all.
Okay, I'm thinking years, but no, that's really quick.
No, it can happen very quickly.
So there's hope for everyone.
But there's also more to it. There's things like the biome what I'm
Yeah.
actually looking at, because they played a huge role in the whole process of everything breaking down.
All right.
When we think of hydrophobic soils or dry soils, there's no such thing as a dry soil. Because if we actually have a very good biome, our mycorrhiza fungi, they've got the ability to actually get into the minute little cracks, which will actually take up that moisture and actually feed to the plant.
All right, well, we're going to get onto that next because that's something else that you're really passionate about and know a lot about. And I'm very interested in mycorrhizal fungi because I think fungi is going to save humanity.
And microbes.
Yeah. All right, let's go and find out more about that. So this is our cooking show.
It does look like it,
All
doesn't
you
it?
need is some rice and some milk. So Ben, what is going on here? I'm transfixed.
And so am I, and everything smells quite strong.
It does, yes. What it is, it's actually lactobacillus.
Yeah.
So lactobacillus is actually it's an organism, microorganism, which is pretty well what our soil actually revolves around. We have a symbolic relationship between the mycorrhizal fungi to the microbes in the actual plant. So what I'm doing is I'm actually encouraging a better biome in my soil.
Right. So it's basically a soil tonic that you're creating, I suppose.
It is a microbe.
Oh, so you're actually sort of infesting the soil, I suppose.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm actually putting in a microbe into the soil. So.
All right. Asking a question though, how did you come up with the idea? Because I'm looking at ingredients in front of me that most would belong in the kitchen.
They do. And
Yeah.
it's simple as making a living fertiliser just by using household ingredients.
All right. So first of all, we're looking at a 20-litre container, which in imperial measurements is, I don't know, but I'll drop that below. So we're going to make 20 litres of your Ben's patented soil
Lactobacillus.
improver. Yes.
Yep.
What do we need?
Okay, so what we do is you start off with, for a 20-litre bucket, around about 100 grams of rice. Doesn't matter what rice.
I was just going to ask that. Does it need to be brown rice?
Organic, basmati.
Yeah, it doesn't matter because what you'll do is you actually will put around for about 100 grams of rice, probably around about a litre and a half of water. And you just stir that for about a minute or two.
Just cold water?
Yeah, just cold water.
Yeah, right.
you
So
don't
you're
wanna-
not
you
cooking the rice?
No, you don't want to cook it.
Right.
Because then you're killing off the starches that are actually around the husk
right.
of the actual rice itself. Once that's done, you actually will strain that water into a 20-litre bucket.
Right.
What you do is it's got to ferment. It's got to culture for about 2 weeks.
So hang on, press pause. So you're straining the water. You then discard the rice. You're just keeping the water.
Yeah, just keeping the water. You can either cook with the rice, do it.
Yes,
if you
I'm
want.
gonna take it.
Don't waste it.
Don't waste it.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay,
cook with
right.
it.
So you've got your rice water.
Yes. So then what you want to do is you want to put the lid on loosely, or if you can actually get a one-way valve, which is actually what you get in a brewing kit,
All right.
and attaching that to the lid of the actual bucket, and then putting the lid on tightly because you want the CO2 to escape, without cooking the actual microbes inside.
So you're not actually wanting the microbes to necessarily get air, but what you're doing is you're allowing whatever's inside to escape.
The CO2, yeah. So
Okay.
letting that escape. If you don't have that one-way valve, I often just leave the lid on loosely. That's all I need.
Okay. So how long does that process take?
So it takes about 2 weeks
Right.
to basically ferment or culture.
So we have only got at this point 2 litres of water in here, rice water.
Yes.
Right. Okay. 2 weeks later, then what?
Then we add around about a litre and a half of milk.
And again,
Up to about 2
normal household milk.
Yeah, just normal milk, but
Yeah.
use full cream milk. Don't
Okay.
use light milk. Light milk it's been cooked for too long. If you can get your hands on raw milk,
Even
that's
better.
even better.
Which
but
you can.
which we're not allowed to.
No, but it's sold as a beauty treatment.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, but you're probably paying an extra amount for it.
There's a brand in Australia called Cleopatra's Milk, I think. Anyway,
Yeah.
and it's a beauty treatment, but it's unpasteurized milk.
Yeah.
Okay, so about a litre of milk.
Yeah, about a litre and a half. You don't have to be.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you need to be precise?
You don't need to overdo it. I think about a litre and a half. This is for a 20-litre bucket.
So that goes into the rice water.
Yep. Yeah.
Then
same, that same thing. Put the lid back on. If you don't have a one-way valve, put the lid on loosely. Keep it out of the sun in a nice sort of cooler sort of area. You don't want it to cook or anything like that. And then let it sit for about a week and a half. You'll actually notice you've got to check it every day. You'll see the milk will curdle. So once it gets to that curdling stage, you know you've actually got yourself the whole starter process of the.
Are you sure we're not making yogurt here?
Or
It's very similar.
kombucha.
Yeah. What you
Okay.
do with that curd, then you basically, if you've got livestock or chickens, or you give that to the chickens, or even put it into your compost.
The
Yeah.
ladies behind us
Yeah,
enjoy
yeah.
your curd. So just press pause then. So you scrape off that curd or you scoop it out.
Yep.
Give that to chickens or the compost heap.
Yep.
Then what?
Then we add a molasses. So we probably want to add around about nearly the same thing, around about 100 to 200 mils of molasses, and then fill the bucket up with water.
Which is, about that much in a jug.
Yep.
So you pour that into your bucket of fermenting miracle fluids.
Yep.
Put in the molasses and then fill it up with water.
Yeah, fill it with water. Within 2 days, you basically pretty well got yourself a living fertilizer.
Within 2 days.
Within 2 days. Well,
So-
we've still got the process with
Yeah.
getting the rice water to culture, and same with the milk. So you're looking at pretty well nearly 3 to 4 weeks there. But then once you've got all that process happening, then add the molasses, and then that will finish off in about 2 days.
All right, well, there's lots of questions that suddenly come up from that.
Yeah.
When the molasses has done its job and you've got the product ready to go, how much do you put down? How often do you put it down?
And would you dilute it from here?
Yeah, you need to dilute it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so roughly for ordinary watering cans, around about 9 litres. So I put around about nearly anywhere between 100 to nearly 300 mils into that.
So that's quite a generous amount.
Yeah, you don't
Yeah,
need
a
to
good
be,
blob.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
don't
yeah.
need
A
to be
good
precise.
pour from
Yeah.
the jug.
Yeah, so it's same. You don't need to be precise with it.
Yeah. So just to clarify, is this a fertilizer?
A living fertilizer.
It's a living fertilizer.
I think if we can encourage our microbiome, they will solubilize a lot of the minerals that's in our soils. Even if you actually do get a soil analysis and they actually turn around and say that you're actually lacking in certain minerals, if you actually have a very good biome in the soil, they will actually go out and sequester those minerals out of soil aggregates and either nitrogen out of our atmosphere, potassium and phosphorus out of our soils. So,
All right. You water it on, but how far would a watering can go and how often do we do it?
look, you can't overdo it. I think if you do it frequently, that's probably ideal.
Yeah.
Because lactobacillus only lives for a few days in the soil. But if you actually have a good food source there, like mulch, even other type of microbes in the soil, they will tend to feed off each other because microbes will feed off other microbes. So if you could get away with probably doing it once a week to once a fortnight, once every 3 weeks, there's no really overdoing it.
Yeah. So you can't do any harm.
No, not at
So
all.
it's not like
You can't
buying
overdose.
a chemical fertilizer and then going, oh, well, if X number of ounces is good, then twice that much should be better. And of course, then you burn the hell out of all your plants.
The good thing about doing it this way is pretty well what the plant's doing is it's actually communicating with the microbes and the fungi. So microbes are sequestering the nutrient, what the plant is actually asking those microbes for. So that regulates those nutrients a lot better.
What a magic world
All right.
it is.
Now, I have to ask one other question. How did you come up with this recipe, or is this something that you have found somewhere else? Or
It's all over. It's everywhere. Look, it's been known for years.
all right, so it's not some brilliant idea you just came up
no,
with and
no.
Secret Ben recipe.
Yeah.
Now, in here we have the finished material. Do we?
We do, yes.
So we have a look.
Yeah,
I can't get the lid off though.
it's hard.
Okay.
yeah, you need to move strong.
Oh, there we go. I'm curious. In my
It looks
imagination,
disgusting.
it's going to smell vile.
What does it smell?
Oh no, it smells like cider.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's actually
really?
a very
Yeah.
nice, sweet smell.
Yeah.
Oh yes, there's nothing nasty
No.
about
It's
that.
very earthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
How long would you leave it in there though before you had to use it
Yeah,
up?
how long will it
Surely it
last?
must have a shelf life.
About 12 months. 2
Oh,
years.
so it would
Yeah.
last for
It
ages.
lasts for a long time.
Wow.
Yeah. I was assuming, 5 minutes after you made it, if you didn't use it, it would go all rancid or something.
So really, this is not very expensive to produce.
No, and it's actually better than actually buying a liquid fertiliser, an inorganic fertiliser. This is much better. Yeah.
Now, can you use this? So obviously, you're using it on your borders, on your beds. Can you use it for pot plants?
Yeah, pot plants, natives, it doesn't matter. You can use it on pretty well everything.
Yeah, well,
Cacti, succulents.
Yep.
see, it doesn't have the NPK thing going on because you're not actually trying to give it a heavy feed, are you? You're actually just trying to make nature do what you want.
Yep,
So
exactly.
this stuff couldn't do any harm to pretty well anything.
No,
I
not
shouldn't
at all.
think.
Yeah, so
Although I'm not sure I'd drink it, but but apart from that, it's very safe product.
Well, there you go, Ben. Thank you. We'll put the recipe in the copy below so that you can follow Ben's regime for creating a very inexpensive. It's not a fertilizer. What are we calling it?
It's a living fertiliser.
A living
Yeah,
fertilizer.
yeah,
That's the
yeah.
phrase. But now there's a spot in your garden where you've done an experiment with 2 different treatments, or in fact no treatment and treatment on some plants. So I think we might go and have a look at that to demonstrate some of your principles.
Yes.
So Ben, what's the story with this row of olives?
When we purchased the property, we had 2 rows of olives. Both of them were pretty well really struggling. I think with either we had very high rainfall or lack of nutrition. So we went and started a process where I think, well, I'm going to try and do one side where I'm going to do a nutritional sort of trial, and then the other side I'm just going to pretty well leave alone. Yeah, and see what.
So before and after.
Yeah, show people.
So
what-
we're on the after side,
Yes.
and they're looking okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with this side, I actually done a regime where I was actually foliar spraying nutrients, but I was targeting my nutrients, especially my micronutrients, which is what really lacks a lot in our soils. I haven't tried any liquid sort of living fertilizer on these just as yet. So I thought, well, I wanted to trial the plant nutrition sort of side of things and seeing what nutrient does to each plant in the sense of on its functions. So this side here, I started with using trace elements, and then from there I actually went into using specific like boron, and then another particular mineral which is like potassium silicate. The silicate is something that's very important. Silicate's everywhere in our soils, but it's a cell strengthener. But the only way it actually works properly is if we have boron and calcium available for the plant.
Yeah, because most elements tie each other up if they're at the wrong levels, don't they? So so you've got to get the right levels of everything. And I know even if you go back to sort of pHs and things, we know that in alkaline soils certain minerals like iron are tied up, and so yes, you've got to get all of those things in your head to work out whether it's going to work and not just spraying stuff around.
Exactly. Yeah.
So this is diluted, and you were spraying it onto the leaves of the plants.
Yeah, it was. But the first thing is I started spraying it first thing in the morning, and underneath the leaf. So when you do it first thing in the morning, they have little pores, which they call stomates, which is actually underneath the leaf. They're open of a morning, and then during the day in the warmer parts, they will actually close up. So if you start spraying it during the day in the warm part, the plant, the nutrient will stick to the leaf, but the plant won't actually absorb it.
So you rush around going, here's breakfast, guys, and spraying it.
But if we apply it first thing in the morning, within 20 minutes, that plant's actually taken around about nearly 60 to 80% of that nutrient.
Wow.
So you are getting an instant effect with it.
Well, I think we should wander to the other side and just show everyone the very marked difference.
Yeah, between what has had some love and care and what has been ignored, basically.
So look at these. They're all twice our heights, and they're fairly bushy and fairly leafy. Let's go over there. Well, to my untrained eye, Ben, these are very sad-looking sticks, which are half the height and almost leafless.
No. Yes, you wouldn't hold this out as an olive branch, I have to say, but anyhow.
Wow.
Yeah, well, these actually suffer a lot from a lot of thrip. as well. Also lack of nutrient density as well. So, yeah.
So a weak plant is always far more prone to pest and disease issues, is it not?
Exactly. Yeah. So what the pest and disease are doing, they're actually just taking out the trash. That's exactly what they're doing. Yeah. When you have a very nutrient dense plant, bush, tree, they're producing a lot of high sugars. So the insects won't go nowhere near it because they can't metabolize the sugars that the plant's actually producing, and also the plant's producing complex forms of proteins, which is very important for a plant to sort of prevent it from actually getting a lot of these fungal problems or insect problems.
Wow. Are you going to treat these? I feel very bad for
Yeah,
this row of olives.
yes, I'm sad for them.
Yeah, this is something I'm going to start with very soon. So these are the trials that I've been doing. So now I'm actually going to start on this side, where the other side I'll still continue with that regime, but I'm actually going to start with using the microbiome, using biodynamics on that side. This side I'm actually just going to do it as pretty well as just plant nutrition, and then see what the difference is then. Yeah.
So the experiment will go on. It's just that you're changing the regime a bit.
Exactly. Yep.
Fascinating. Well, great to see the olives, and I'm glad these are going to get some love and attention.
Yeah.
So, Stephen, we spend a lot of time in your compost bin.
Yes, compost bins do tend to attract gardeners, funnily enough. Yeah, I think it's one of those things. Everybody wants to know what you're using in your compost, and you always know when you're talking to a good gardener, because if they start talking about the constituents of their compost over dinner, you know they're engaged.
Which brings us then to your compost. So what role does your compost play in your treatment of your soil?
I more tend to use it for our vegetable garden.
Right.
So because the vegetables are depleting the nutrient in our soils quite rapidly,
They do.
especially every season.
Yeah.
So by putting the nutrient back in and also feeding the biome back into our soils, so I actually put it back into our vegetable garden.
Right.
Well,
So-
do you find, like I do, that it doesn't matter how hard you work at your compost, you never have enough to do major jobs around the garden? It just all disappears.
It does.
So this is more like a classic sort of fertilizer and treatment rather than some of your sort of soil rebuilding, which you've perhaps done in other parts of the garden.
Yeah, so I feel it's so I want to get that with a compost. It's very, very good with adding humates into our soil, which is very, very good for especially a vegetable garden.
Okay, for those of us who don't know, what are humates?
So humates is your humic acid or fulvic acid, and it's actually probably one of the best things to actually have. It's feeding our microbiome, especially with being a humic. It'll feed our mycorrhizal sort of network, where fulvic will tend to sort of more feed our microbial network.
So compost is good, man.
It is, yeah. But
Compost is great, you just never can get enough of it.
No, there you go. So, now, Ben, I am glad I can just pigeonhole you. So I grow a lot of things in pots, and I add a mycorrhizal fungi powder, which I just buy online, into the potting mix. So what are your thoughts about that? Is it useful? Am I wasting my time? I believe I'm doing something fabulous.
Well, you are.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, but it's better in the ground because you don't actually have the soil aggregates what you would in the ground in a potting mix. Some potting mixes actually do contain a bit of stone in them because you find that the microbes and the fungi, that's what they'll sequester a lot of their minerals out of. They release an enzyme into around the aggregate and excrete the nutrient that an actually plant needs.
So that's very interesting because an orchid grower that I know in Ireland actually uses shell grit in her mix. So now this is making a lot of sense. So the mycorrhizal fungi then are able to actually take the nutrients out of something that's solid, like a stone or grit or shell, and get the calcium or whatever it is from it.
Yeah, and it's only small numbers. It's
That's extraordinary.
It's minute numbers, but they're the minute numbers that actually make a difference in the actual plant.
Right. So then, okay, so changing the subject. So in your average potting mix, it would always be good to include some kind of gritty matter aggregate, wouldn't it?
Yeah, as long as it doesn't sort of sit too heavy.
Yeah,
that's the main thing. Because being in a pot, it's confined. If it compacts too much, then you're not actually getting the roots to sort of manoeuvre around the actual pot itself. So that's why potting mix is designed for pots. So it actually allows the aeration through and moisture to sort of flow quite freely through it then.
Right. So you don't think there's anything sort of inherently wrong with me just adding my mycorrhizal fungi powder?
It's not, but you're probably actually best applying it to the foliage
Oh, okay.
than you are to the soil, because you actually have a microbiome in around the actual leaf surface.
Oh.
So, but the other thing is you don't want to target just one species of microbe or fungi. You want to get a diverse range of different microbes and different sort of mycorrhizal fungi. Because what they do is they all do different roles. If you only target one, then you won't get a healthier sort of soil system, because you're only sort of targeting one biome that's going to sort of sequester only one thing in our soils or out of our atmosphere.
That makes sense. And you were just saying, what's the statistic in a spoonful of soil?
So in 1 teaspoon of soil, healthy soil, you should actually have about 8 billion different type of microbes. That's in 1 teaspoon of soil.
So it's impossible to try and artificially create that, but you can create the best environment for that to happen naturally.
You can, yes. Yeah. And the good thing with that one is actually using humates, especially with fulvic acid and humic acid. When you start adding the lactobacillus or a powdered form sort of mycorrhizal fungi, still put them in, but still actually make sure there's some sort of food source to go with them, because that's also going to feed the other microbes and all fungi that's in around.
Right, so you'd be mixing it up with other things. So if I'm adding my mycorrhizal powder fungi, I should be adding some compost.
Yep.
And the fabulous brew that we just made.
Yeah, yep, definitely.
A bit of everything.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Okay, well I'm gonna step up my mycorrhizal fungi treatment then.
Yeah, put it on the leaf.
Okay, I will do.
Yeah.
Stephen, well, I feel vindicated to some degree about my use and promotion of mycorrhizal fungi, although I'm not doing it fully.
No. Apparently there are better ways that you could be doing that.
Yeah.
I have to say, Ben's attitude to what he's doing and his passion about what he's doing with his soil sort of vindicates me a bit. I mean, I'm not using the products Ben's been making up here, although who knows, I might well be shortly.
Because that seems so simple.
Yeah, it's straightforward enough. But what I took away from what Ben showed us was, in fact, that really, in lots of ways, you're not feeding your plants, you're feeding your soil,
Yes.
and then your plants take out of it what they need. And I've always been a great advocate of that, because people often say, oh, what fertiliser should I use?
Yes, and you always say none.
Yeah, well,
Just compost, coffee grinds, organic material.
anything you can lay your hands on. And I always say to people that it's not a matter of the perfect fertiliser for anything, because your soil is like you are. You might have a favourite thing, but then you don't want to have it 365 days of the year. So diversity is what it's all about. So if you can put in all of the different things that plants need, well, obviously they're going to do well, because they'll take out of it what they need.
And I think if you have any questions for Ben, go to the Instagram account and you can message him directly, because he's very passionate about soil health. And there are soil associations basically everywhere. There are
certainly.
in Europe, in North America, and in Australia. And in many other places too, I'm sure. So if you're passionate about improving your soil, find your local soil association. I know in Britain that King Charles, I think, is the patron of the soil association. So there you go. There's some big ticket patrons.
Yes, exactly. Yes, we're not anywhere near that, are we?
No. Well, you're the patron of the Royal Horticultural Society, Stephen.
Yes,
and you're
direct
a king.
connection.
You're a king amongst us.
Oh, goodness gracious me.
But now, if you want to know what we're doing next week, you'll have to hit subscribe.
And don't forget our Monday Shorts. So if you've got a question you'd like to ask me, please put it in the comment section below, and we'll get around to answering it on a Monday.
Yes, and I hope you've loved this soil epic, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye all.